At the end-of-year party for a major company, the boss falls ill during his speech. When it seems like nothing can be done, a waitress who has always been underestimated takes charge and saves the boss. Emma adjusts her bun in the worn-out mirror of her small apartment bathroom, taking a deep breath to calm her restless heart. The white blouse and black apron are the same as always, but tonight, everything feels heavier. She applies a discreet lipstick, thinking that even amidst all the glitz and luxury she will remain invisible. Deep down, she tries not to expect anything. Just another event, another where she'll be no more than the waitress holding a tray. But for some reason, a strange feeling won't leave her chest. The clock on the wall reads 6:30 p.m., and Emma slips her phone into her pocket after sending a quick message to her sister. "Let me know if you need anything." 4 years since their father lost his job and their mother fell ill, Emma has been the family's pillar. She didn't dream of this job, but it pays the bills, and for now that's all that matters. Though her business degree sits tucked away in a drawer, she can't forget that so far, it hasn't opened any doors. When Emma arrives at the event hall, the golden doors of the luxurious hotel remind her of the distant world she's about to enter. Huge chandeliers cast warm light across the room, and the marble floor is so polished that she sees her shimmering reflection as she walks by. Everything is flawless: crystal glasses, exotic flowers in giant vases, and waiters bustling around like her, organizing last-minute details. A soft jazz band plays in the background as elegantly dressed waitstaff line up for the party to begin. The first guests start arriving, men in impeccable suits and women in long glittering gowns. Expensive perfumes linger in the air, and polite but pretentious conversations echo through the hall. Emma moves behind the scenes, carrying a tray of champagne flutes. She can't help but think, how many years of work would it take to pay for a party like this? She adjusts her apron, trying to push the thought away. Her job is to smile and go unnoticed, nothing more. The event gains momentum, and Emma sees the room fill with the company's most powerful names. A buzz arises at the main entrance when Michael Reynolds finally arrives. Commanding, he strides through the hall as if the world revolves around him. The custom suit fits his athletic frame perfectly, and his sharp gaze seems to measure everything around him. It's no exaggeration to say that he commands not only the company but any space he occupies. Employees straighten up, some discreetly bowing in respect. Emma has heard many stories about Reynolds. He's an unsettling mix of genius and tyrant, cold, calculating, and demanding to the extreme, known for destroying careers as easily as making million-dollar investments. But to him, Emma is just another waitress, as she has always been. As Michael circulates among the executives, with refined laughter spreading around, Emma works with precision. Occasionally she catches glances from guests, but they quickly shift away as if she isn't truly seen. A fleeting anxiety grips her for a moment. If I were who I wanted to be, I'd be with them, not serving them. But she quickly dismisses the thought. Now isn't the time for daydreams. The party progresses, and Emma finds a moment to breathe behind the scenes. She grabs a glass of water and closes her eyes for a few seconds, just to collect herself. The muffled sound of conversations reaches her, and she knows the night's highlight is approaching: the CEO's speech. Once again, the unsettling feeling returns, as if something significant is about to happen, something beyond her control. Back in the hall, Emma sees guests gathering near the stage. Michael Reynolds steps up, adjusting the microphone with the precision of someone who knows the weight of every word. The room falls silent, eyes attentive and glasses raised. Emma, on the edge of the gathering, observes from afar, holding her tray. For a brief moment, she allows herself to imagine what it would be like to stand at the center of that world, rather than just on its margins. The silence is absolute as Michael begins to speak, his eyes scanning the crowd as if trying to penetrate every mind in the room. Emma watches from the back, a mix of curiosity and resignation in her gaze. She doesn't know it yet, but this night, which seemed like just another, is about to take a turn that will change her life forever. Emma glides through the room with precise steps, holding the tray full of glasses. Her movements are swift but silent, as if her presence doesn't matter. As soon as a guest takes a drink, she's off toward the next one. The executives are immersed in their bubbles, loudly discussing business, mergers, and profits, without even glancing at the girl serving them. It's not the first time Emma feels that here she is not a person, just a shadow among the glittering jewelry and pristine suits. She pauses briefly near a table decorated with extravagant orchid arrangements. Unintentionally, she overhears part of a conversation between two middle-aged executives. That intern from finance asked for a raise. Does he think this is an NGO? One says, laughing harshly. Young people are such a problem. They all want quick recognition without paying their dues, the other replies dismissively. Emma grips the tray tighter, forcing herself not to react. A part of her wanted to laugh too, but not in agreement. She wanted to remind them that not everyone had the same chances to start at the top. As she moves about, Emma notices how some guests glance at her just long enough to recognize her as the waitress before looking away. No greetings, no acknowledgments. She knows this world doesn't see her as part of it. Still, she holds her head high, maintaining the trained smile on her face. Her job is to go unnoticed, but that doesn't mean she doesn't see what's happening around her. Like an invisible observer, she catches subtle glances of complicity among the powerful, coded comments, and laughs that conceal rivalries. Michael Reynolds keeps his distance, as if the rest of the party were merely a stage to pass the time. Emma observes him from afar, unable to suppress her curiosity. He stands out even among other influential figures. There's something in the way his eyes scan the room, evaluating, measuring, deciding. His rigid posture and tailored suit seem like armor. Michael is known for being as meticulous as he is ruthless, and though no one says it aloud, everyone seems slightly afraid to cross his path. Emma balances her tray, continuing to serve. The conversations around her remain arrogant, revolving around million-dollar bonuses, stocks, and market strategies, none of which relates to her reality. For a moment, her mind drifts to memories of her university years. She recalls nights spent studying into the early hours, filled with dreams and plans. Back then, she believed she would have a promising career, occupying an important position in some company. But life took a different turn, and here she was, serving drinks to people who would never know her name. Frustration gnaws at her, but she pushes it away, like someone closing a heavy door. It's not worth holding on to useless thoughts. She glances at the clock in the corner of the room. 2 more hours until the party ends. 2 more hours of pretending to be invisible. 2 more hours of overhearing fragments of conversations that don't belong to her. But deep down, something within her refuses to be extinguished. No matter how tough life has been, Emma knows she wasn't born to remain unnoticed forever. While offering another glass of champagne, she catches a revealing conversation between 2 elegantly dressed women. Michael is brilliant, but he has no heart, one whispers. The other nods, adjusting a diamond earring. He has no patience for mistakes. Did you see how he fired the marketing manager last month? Right in front of everyone. Emma realizes that, although they admire the CEO's authority, the elite around her also fear the man who leads the company. Between rounds, Emma senses a slight unease in the air. The guests are there to celebrate, but the tension is palpable, as if no one wants to let their guard down. Everyone seems trapped in a rehearsed choreography, where every smile and greeting is a calculated move. Emma navigates the scene as a discreet observer, almost fascinated by this social dance that feels so distant from her own world. She knows that in this room, any mistake is unforgivable, and no one, not even the almighty Michael Reynolds, is safe. With an empty tray, Emma heads to the side of the hall to pick up more glasses. She looks around and sees how everyone seems to be playing a role. Executives who despise each other exchange fake smiles, while others disguise looks of contempt. Emma realizes that beneath all the luxury and power, this world isn't as perfect as it appears. And for the first time that night, an unexpected thought crosses her mind. Maybe it's not so bad being on the outside watching. After all, no one inside seems genuinely happy. The lights dim softly, and the guests' murmurs are cut off like a blade slicing through the air. Michael Reynolds steps onto the stage with the calculated precision of an actor who knows exactly how to control his audience. Conversations die, and the silence is almost palpable. From a discreet corner, Emma watches as the CEO adjusts the microphone. He doesn't smile. He doesn't need to. His mere presence demands absolute attention. Michael takes a few seconds before speaking, but every second is charged with expectation. His gaze sweeps across the room as if analyzing everyone present. When he finally speaks, his voice is deep and sharp, devoid of emotion. This year has been difficult for all of us. He begins, pausing strategically. But we weathered the storm. And we won. No applause yet, only a heavy silence as if everyone knows he hasn't reached the critical point. As Michael talks about economic challenges and the company's recovery, Emma notices that he chooses every word with surgical precision. Nothing is improvised. The guests listen with the focus of soldiers receiving orders before a battle. Michael continues, "We didn't let cutbacks, competition, or uncertainty shake us. You proved yourselves indispensable." It sounds like praise, but there's a subtle hint of demand rather than genuine gratitude. Emma's eyes stay fixed on Michael. There's a tension in his shoulders, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. He appears commanding but also weary, like someone carrying the weight of impossible expectations. Next year won't be any easier, he warns coldly. Those who want to remain relevant will need to prove their worth. Every single day. The room remains silent, and Emma realizes that, while Michael admires results, he offers no guarantees. Executives from different departments nod, as if accepting an inevitable challenge. Some exchange quick glances, weighing Michael's words like a carefully measured threat. Every sentence feels as sharp as a blade, capable of slicing through both insecurity and ambition. Emma senses the air growing heavier. Even at the top, no one feels entirely safe. That's the unspoken message behind Michael's words. Emma, still holding her tray, watches in fascination. The contrast between the sophistication of the event and the brutality in Michael's speech is striking. There's no genuine celebration in his words. He isn't there to express gratitude, but to remind everyone that success is fragile. The tension thickens, and Emma understands that, at the heart of corporate power, the fear of losing is as strong as the desire to win. Michael pauses, taking a sip of water. The dry sound of the glass being placed back on the table echoes through the room. He takes a deep breath and continues, as if nearing the most important part. "We're just getting started," he declares, his voice carrying a cold determination. "We need to go further. Complacency will not be tolerated. Those who can't keep up will be left behind." Emma feels a chill run down her spine. Beneath the motivational speech lies a veiled threat. Everyone is under constant evaluation. Suddenly, one of the guests starts clapping, and soon the rest of the room joins in, creating a wave of applause. But the smiles are calculated, the expressions tense. Emma can feel that even as they applaud, many fear Michael's words. He is not just a leader, he is a judge. And his verdicts can be merciless. Michael gives a brief signal with his hand, and the applause stops immediately. "The party is yours," he says, as if granting permission that everyone was waiting for. Without another word, he steps away from the microphone. Emma watches as he surveys the crowd one last time, as if evaluating the impact of his speech. His eyes appear heavy, but his posture remains steady. For a moment, he leans slightly against the side of the podium, a nearly imperceptible gesture, but one that doesn't escape Emma's sharp observation. Then something shifts. Michael takes another step to the side, but something odd happens. His usually impeccable stance falters for a second. He clutches his chest, and his expression, once firm, crumples into confusion and pain. The color drains from his face, as if a shadow is extinguishing his inner light. Murmurs ripple through the room, quiet at first but soon building into a wave of unease. Michael tries to say something more, but the words seem to die on his lips. He stumbles forward, and for a moment, the entire hall freezes as if time has slowed to a crawl. Then he collapses, his body hitting the floor with a heavy thud. The sound is dry and jarring, shattering the silence of the party like broken glass. A wave of shock spreads through the room. For a second, no one can believe what just happened. Panic sets in almost immediately. Guests scream, some covering their mouths in horror, while others step back, fearing the worst. Executives who had seemed unshakable exchange stunned glances, but no one moves to help. Women in shimmering gowns murmur among themselves, as if hoping to wake from a nightmare. Men in suits furrow their brows, trying to maintain an air of calm. "Someone call an ambulance," shouts one of the guests, his voice hoarse and urgent. But no one seems to know what to do. The elite, who always pride themselves on being in control, are now paralyzed by surprise and fear. Executives whisper among themselves, more concerned with the potential fallout of the incident than Michael's health. "This will ruin the night. What if photos leak?" murmurs one, while another glances at his watch as if itching to leave the situation behind. The chaos is total. People crowd around the stage, but no one dares get too close to the CEO's body. Security hesitates, as if afraid that any wrong move might worsen the situation. In a corner of the room, someone finally pulls out a phone to call for help, but it seems too late. Michael's body lies motionless on the floor, and the silence of his absent breathing is deafening. Emma, from where she stands, sees it all as if it were a scene frozen in time. No one is doing anything. The man who was supposed to be the company's ultimate leader lies vulnerable, and the crowd has no idea how to respond. She feels a knot form in her throat. There's a collective fear in the air, but it's laced with something even more bitter: selfishness. No one wants to be the first to step in. The priorities are to maintain appearances and avoid scandal. Near the stage, a well-dressed woman holds her head in despair. He stopped breathing. Someone do something. But her words drift aimlessly with no recipient. The executives, still dazed, seem hypnotized by what just happened. Each second of inaction stretches the tension tighter, like a rope about to snap. Emma's stomach churns. A sense of discomfort spreads through her body, as if the entire hall is about to sink into a bottomless pit. Michael, the man no one ever imagined could show weakness, is lying there lifeless. And around him, the scene is one of impotence and selfishness, poorly disguised. The night that was supposed to be a celebration has turned into a living nightmare, with nothing but fear and indecision reflected in the faces around her. The lights continue to shine and the glasses remain full, but the magic of the event has shattered. Everyone seems to wait for someone else to take the initiative, like a hot potato no one wants to hold. And time is running out, too fast. Emma's heart races, but her body moves before her mind can question it. The tray slips from her hands, hitting the floor with a dull thud, sending glasses and champagne scattering at the guests' feet. She rushes through the hall, ignoring the confused glances and whispers. Her steps are quick and deliberate. Nothing else matters, just the man lying unconscious before her. The one who once seemed indestructible is now vulnerable. She kneels beside Michael Reynolds without hesitation. The proximity feels surreal. The expensive suit, the pale face, the perfectly aligned tie, everything seems out of place. Emma places 2 fingers on his neck, searching for a pulse. It's faint, but it's there. "Stay with me," she whispers, more to herself than to him. Around her, the murmurs grow louder, but Emma pays no attention. Every second is crucial. With swift movements, she tilts Michael's head slightly to open his airway. The first aid knowledge she learned long ago kicks in instinctively. Her mind sharpens as if operating on another level. There's no time to wait, she thinks. Without hesitation, she checks his breathing, barely any. His chest isn't rising as it should. The world around her fades into distant noise, a curtain of anxious, useless voices. Someone asks, does she know what she's doing? Emma doesn't answer. Her fingers press firmly on the correct spot on his sternum, and she begins chest compressions. Her hands move rhythmically, maintaining the blood flow that keeps Michael teetering between life and death. Emma feels her eyes burn with concentration but keeps going. 1, 2, 3. She counts mentally, maintaining the perfect rhythm. The imaginary ticking in her head is the only thing that matters now. His skin feels cold beneath her fingers, and a thin layer of sweat forms on her forehead. Her arms begin to ache, but she doesn't stop. "Stay with me," she whispers again, almost like a prayer. The guests surround her, but no one dares interfere. One suggests, hesitantly, "Shouldn't we wait for the paramedics?" Another adds, "What if she's doing it wrong?" But deep down they know Emma is the only one doing anything. The executives, usually the ones giving orders, now stand silent, powerless. A faint, almost imperceptible sound escapes Michael's lips. Emma pauses for a moment to check his breathing again. It's still weak but present. A flicker of hope ignites inside her, but the battle isn't over yet. She continues alternating chest compressions and rescue breaths with absolute precision. Each movement feels like it stretches into eternity as the hall's clock ticks mercilessly on. Sweat trickles down Emma's temples, but she doesn't allow herself to stop, not even for a second. The pain in her arms is irrelevant. The pressure around her is overwhelming, but it's nothing compared to the weight of the responsibility she feels in her hands. Michael Reynolds, the most feared and admired man in the company, now has his life hanging by a thread. And in this moment, it is Emma and only Emma who holds that thread. From the back of the hall, someone finally shouts, "The ambulance is on the way," but Emma doesn't look up. Every second is vital. Her focus remains absolute, and her determined expression stands in stark contrast to the panic and helplessness of the executives around her. The luxurious event hall, filled with the powerful and influential, now relies entirely on a girl who has always been invisible. And at that moment, Emma is no longer just a waitress, she is the only hope for saving a life. Siren sounds echo from outside the hotel, growing louder by the second, though to Emma, they seem a lifetime away. Each compression on Michael's chest is one more second she buys between him and the unknown. Finally, the sharp sound of paramedics bursting into the hall cuts through the heavy air. The crowd of guests parts like a receding tide, making way for the medical team. Emma keeps going until the last possible moment, stopping only when a paramedic touches her shoulder. "We've got it from here," he says. The paramedics work with practiced efficiency, but Emma can't take her eyes off Michael. They place an oxygen mask over his face, attaching wires and monitors that blink like tiny beacons in the darkness. The irregular beeping of the heart monitor echoes through the room, a sound filled with both hope and uncertainty. "He's stabilizing," one of the paramedics announces, and Emma finally releases the breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Michael is carefully placed on a stretcher and quickly wheeled out. The guests watch in uncomfortable silence, many still holding champagne glasses. No one seems to know what to say. The festive atmosphere has been replaced by an oppressive tension, as if a shadow has fallen over the night. The chandeliers still glitter overhead, but the magic of the event has dissolved, leaving only an emptiness behind. As the paramedics disappear through the golden doors, a restless murmur spreads through the hall. Some guests speculate about the CEO's health, while others whisper theories about what the incident could mean for the company. Will he return to work? Who will take over if he can't? Will this affect the stock prices? The questions float through the air like leaves in the wind, though no one dares voice them too loudly. For a moment, Emma remains kneeling where she was just minutes before, as if the world hasn't quite started turning again. Her arms ache and throb, but her mind is silent. Only now does she notice the dozens of eyes focused on her, some filled with surprise, others with disbelief, and many with a curious, almost hostile gaze. For the first time, she isn't invisible. A woman in a silk dress approaches, narrowing her eyes at Emma as if examining a peculiar piece of art. "How did you know what to do?" she asks, a mixture of astonishment and skepticism in her voice. Emma feels the weight of the crowd stares but responds simply, "I took a first aid course." She offers no further explanation and doesn't try to. The murmurs around her grow, though Emma can't tell whether they're murmurs of admiration or judgment. Some guests quietly say it was luck, while others seem uncomfortable to have witnessed something so unsettling. "She saved his life," someone whispers from the back of the room. "And what if she had done it wrong?" another counters with a bitter tone. Every gaze directed at Emma seems to carry a veiled judgment, as though what she did was both audacious and expected. Slowly, Emma rises, feeling the weight of the moment pressing on her shoulders. As she smooths her wrinkled apron, she realizes something has shifted. The same people who never noticed her now look at her with a mixture of respect and discomfort. It's as if the waitress who always stood on the sidelines has crossed an invisible line no one expected, and one that cannot be erased. The room remains heavy with silence, and even as the music timidly returns, nothing can bring the party back to life. Emma takes a step toward the familiar refuge of the backroom, but before she can leave, she senses someone watching her. Glancing around, she sees familiar faces from the company's senior management whispering among themselves and casting curious glances her way. She knows the party is over. For her, however, everything is just beginning. I will begin translating the document from Portuguese to English while keeping the original formatting intact. The next morning, the buzz throughout the company headquarters was impossible to ignore. In the hallways, elevators, and even in group chats, everyone was talking about the same thing: the end-of-year party and the collapse of Michael Reynolds. But one detail drew even more attention: the story of the waitress who saved the CEO. The name Emma was on everyone's lips, like an unexpected mystery, a piece that didn't seem to fit. "Did you hear what happened? A waitress revived him," said a financial department employee, hastily sipping her coffee. Can you imagine? A girl from the catering staff. Her coworker next to her scoffed in disbelief. And what if she had done something wrong? She'd have been fired on the spot. She's lucky it worked out. The conversation wasn't purely admiring. There was a subtle layer of resentment, as if Emma had crossed an invisible barrier that was supposed to keep her in her place. In the back of the cafeteria and service area, the atmosphere was also strange. Some co-workers, who hardly spoke to Emma before, now greeted her with forced smiles and questions masked as curiosity. "So, you really saved the boss? Wow, I never imagined." Others, however, looked at her with poorly concealed envy. "She got lucky," one of them grumbled. "Opportunities like that don't just come to anyone, and to her of all people." Emma, who had returned to work that morning like any other day, felt the weight of those stares. Every move she made seemed to be analyzed differently. Once invisible, she was now watched as if she carried something valuable and dangerous. Being noticed, she realized, wasn't as liberating as she had imagined. While it sparked curiosity, it also invited judgment. Around 10 a.m., while Emma was organizing trays in the back of the kitchen, she was called to take a phone call. "Michael Reynolds wants to speak with you," said her supervisor in a tone that mixed surprise and envy. The entire room fell silent for a few seconds, as if no one could process the fact that the company's CEO, still hospitalized, was asking to speak to a waitress. Emma picked up the phone with a mixture of apprehension and surprise. On the other end, a firm and direct voice. "Emma, I heard you saved my life. I want to see you as soon as possible." Without leaving room for objections, he provided the hospital address and hung up. Emma stood there for a moment, holding the phone with trembling hands. The conversation had lasted less than a minute but carried enormous weight. As soon as she hung up, the whispers started again. "Why would he ask to see you?" asked a coworker, raising an eyebrow with a forced smile. Emma wasn't sure how to respond. Everything was happening too fast. The people around her murmured, exchanging malicious glances, as if they wanted to find some hidden explanation for the contact between the powerful CEO and the young waitress. As Emma made her way to the hospital, she tried to organize her thoughts. Why did Michael Reynolds want to see her? Was it just gratitude? Or was there something more behind this meeting? The doubts weighed on her mind like stones, but one thing was clear. This was an opportunity, maybe the only one she'd have in years. And even though she didn't know what to expect, something inside her told her that this moment would change the course of her life forever. At the hospital, Emma was greeted by the receptionist with a curious look. "He's waiting for you?" she asked, as if she couldn't believe Michael Reynolds would meet someone like Emma. Emma simply nodded and waited as the receptionist made an internal call. A few minutes later, she was escorted to the room. As she crossed the threshold, she found the CEO looking attentive, but this time there was no judgment in his gaze. Only silent curiosity, making her feel that this meeting would be more significant than either of them could imagine. Michael Reynolds sat in a hospital chair, his posture still rigid despite visible fatigue. As Emma entered the room, he observed her in silence for a few seconds. His eyes scanned her as if trying to see beyond the surface, beyond the young waitress he thought he knew. Emma felt small under that sharp gaze, but she didn't look away. She knew this encounter wasn't just a formality. "Emma, take a seat," he said, his voice low but full of authority. She obeyed, sitting in the chair beside his bed. There was a pause between them, not uncomfortable but heavy with meaning. "Why is a girl with your presence and intelligence serving drinks at parties?" Michael asked, direct as a blade. The question caught her off guard, but Emma decided there was no reason to hide the truth anymore. She took a deep breath before answering. "I have a degree in business administration, sir. But when my family went through a financial crisis, I had to drop everything to help. The waitress job was what came up at the time, and I couldn't refuse it." Michael listened without blinking, absorbing every word. He didn't interrupt, only kept his gaze fixed on her, as if processing every detail of her story in his mind. "Administration?" he repeated, almost as if speaking to himself. "With those credentials, you could be sitting at one of those boardroom tables, not carrying trays." There was no sarcasm in his voice, only an objective observation that seemed to intrigue him. Emma shrugged with a tired half-smile. "It's not always that easy. Resumes don't pay the bills." For a moment, Michael remained silent, his gaze lost in some distant point. Emma felt as though he was connecting invisible dots in his mind. Then he looked at her again, this time with something different in his eyes. It wasn't the usual veiled disdain she was used to at events like these. It was respect. As if, for the first time, he saw her for who she really was. "You're capable. And resilient," Michael said, almost like a verdict. "People like you often get lost along the way. But you found a way to survive." Emma didn't know what to say. The weight of those words coming from him was unexpected. And before she could respond, Michael did something she never imagined. "I want you on my team." Emma blinked, trying to process what she had just heard. "On your team?" The disbelief slipped from her voice before she could stop it. He nodded with a slight smile, the first she had seen from him since their conversation began. "Start from the bottom if you want. But I won't waste someone like you." There was firmness in his proposal. It wasn't a favor or charity. It was a clear and direct opportunity. Emma's mind raced in all directions, but one thing was certain. This was real. Michael Reynolds, the man known for being cold and demanding, was offering her a chance many in the company would never have. "I expect nothing less than excellence," he added, his expression returning to its usual seriousness. "But for the first time, I believe you're capable of delivering it." Emma, still stunned, nodded slowly. "I accept," she replied, her voice barely audible, but her eyes shone with determination. At that moment, she knew her life had just changed forever. It wouldn't be easy, nothing ever was. But now there was an open door before her. And Emma was ready to walk through it, even though she didn't yet know what challenges awaited on the other side. The news of Emma's new role caused more uproar than she had imagined. In less than a week, word spread like wildfire that the party waitress now held an official position within the company. In the hallways, glances that used to pass her by unnoticed were now filled with curiosity and venom. Bitter remarks were whispered in discreet corners. "She's only here because she saved the boss," said a woman from marketing, adjusting her badge with disdain. "He wouldn't have hired her based on merit for sure." The first signs of sabotage were subtle. Important emails never reached Emma's inbox, mysteriously disappearing along the way. Reports she submitted for meetings showed up incomplete or with pages swapped, always accompanied by the same casual comment, "Oh, how strange, you must have forgotten." When Emma asked around, she encountered innocent faces and cynical smiles. No one seemed willing to admit to any foul play, but it was clear they didn't want her to last long. The senior executives saw her as a mistake in the company's perfect machinery. How could someone without corporate pedigree get so close to the inner circle? Worse, if she proved competent, she could threaten the status of many of them. "It won't take long for her to make a mistake," whispered a finance director over coffee. "Then we'll see if Reynolds still wants to protect her." The plan was simple: wear her down slowly until she gave up on her own. Emma wasn't naive. She knew she was walking into hostile territory. Every day she felt the tension growing around her, as if she was being tested at every step. In meetings, there was always someone to interrupt her mid-sentence or throw in an ironic comment disguised as advice. "You should talk less and listen more," suggested an experienced executive with a sharp smile. Emma bit her tongue and mentally noted every jab. If life had taught her anything, it was to wait for the right moment to strike back. The days became long and exhausting. In addition to handling the tasks of her new position, Emma had to deal with misunderstandings deliberately created to undermine her. Invitations to important meetings weren't forgotten, and she only found out when it was too late. Every mistake seemed like a small victory for those hoping to see her fail. They didn't need to be explicit. Emotional exhaustion was a powerful weapon, and they knew it. Still, Emma refused to give in. Every night, when she came home exhausted, she reminded herself of the difficult path that had brought her here. She hadn't given up everything and endured humiliations just to quit now. It was a game of endurance, and she was determined to survive. As much as they doubted her, Emma knew she had something many of them didn't: the ability to adapt and face the unexpected. That was her greatest bet. In the hallways, fake smiles followed her like shadows. "Good morning, Emma," said sugary voices, while the same people plotted behind her back. There was always a sense that something was being schemed. A denied promotion here, a minor project diverted there. They wouldn't do anything obvious. They wanted her to drown on her own. Emma knew she couldn't rely on anyone but herself. The company, which had once seemed like an opportunity, now felt like a minefield where every step had to be calculated. And she knew the executives weren't playing fair. They surrounded her like predators, waiting for her to make the slightest mistake so they could pounce mercilessly. But behind all the hostility, Emma knew one thing: the attacks were proof that she was a threat. They didn't just fear her talent. They feared that someone like her, an outsider without privileges or pedigree but with determination, might prove that the system supporting their comfortable positions wasn't as invincible as it seemed. Emma knew the transition to her new role would be difficult, but she hadn't expected the constant weight of suspicious glances. Every step she took felt scrutinized, as if she didn't belong there. In meetings, colleagues deliberately ignored her, discussing topics she didn't master as if it were a veiled test. They weren't waiting for Emma to fail, they were waiting for her to surrender. The silence itself was a powerful weapon. Each time Emma made a suggestion, the responses were vague or indifferent. "Good idea, but we've tried that before," they'd say with condescending smiles, as if she were a child trying to play with adults. When she tried to assert herself, the words seemed to die in the air, smothered by cold looks and subtle gestures that conveyed, "You don't belong here." Emma began to realize that it wasn't a lack of competence isolating her but prejudice. To some, she would always be the waitress who got lucky, someone who didn't deserve to be among those who had followed the correct career paths. This hit her deeply, but Emma was stubborn. Dealing with suspicious glances wasn't new to her. The challenge was managing the emotional fatigue that came with it. The pressure grew silently, almost invisibly but oppressively. Deadlines seemed shorter for her than for others, and there was no room for mistakes. When she didn't master a task right away, the whispers grew louder. "It's only a matter of time before she quits." The few compliments she received were accompanied by disguised irony. Emma began to understand that surviving there wouldn't be about talent, it would be about resilience. Michael Reynolds watched from afar, observing more than speaking. He wasn't the type to give motivational speeches or offer easy solutions. But at key moments, when Emma seemed close to faltering, he made his presence felt. A short email with clear instructions, last-minute approval for one of her ideas, a firm look during a meeting, small gestures that conveyed, "I see you." These moments of silent support were enough for Emma to pull herself together and keep going. She knew Michael was testing not only her competence but her ability to withstand the pressure. And that kept her alert. There was no room for complaints or doubts. Every achievement would have to be earned through hard work, and she needed to prove she could handle it. Despite the strain, Emma began to find small points of support within the company. Some people, though not openly supportive, grew genuinely curious about her. She realized that she couldn't win everyone over at once, but she could win one person at a time. A finance assistant offered to help her with complicated spreadsheets. A project analyst shared old files to make her work easier. They were timid alliances, but they were a start. Gradually, Emma adjusted to the new routine, but the path was far from smooth. She had to prove her worth with every step. There was no room for error, and her victories had to be more impressive than those of others. While her colleagues could afford to be merely competent, Emma needed to be excellent. And even so, a shadow hovered over her achievements, as if no effort could erase the initial stigma. Yet Emma stood firm. Each challenge overcome made her feel more prepared for the next. And although Michael's support was discreet, she knew he was there, following her progress with a mix of expectation and patience. And that was what motivated her. The feeling that, for the first time, someone saw beyond what she appeared to be, and that she needed to earn that trust no matter the cost. Emma began to suspect that something was wrong when small mistakes in her work became more frequent. Files disappeared mysteriously, and important information she was certain she had sent never reached its destination. At the same time, malicious rumors began circulating through the corridors. "She doesn't know what she's doing," they whispered. "What happened at the party was just luck. She won't last." At first, Emma thought these were just natural murmurs in a competitive environment. But it soon became clear there was something darker behind it. A casual conversation overheard between two employees in the break room revealed part of what was happening. "The strategy team has their eyes on her," one of them said, thinking no one was listening. "If she messes up soon, maybe one of us can take over the project she got." Emma felt her blood run cold. This wasn't just about disdain or envy, there was a conspiracy underway to ensure her failure. Determined to uncover more, Emma began connecting the dots. Small, deliberate mistakes tied to her projects, documents disappearing just before meetings, and last-minute changes to meeting schedules without her knowledge. Gradually, Emma realized this wasn't a coincidence. A group of influential executives was manipulating situations to undermine her credibility and ensure her initiatives failed. Each day the pressure grew. Some people who had initially shown willingness to help began to distance themselves, afraid that associating with her would harm their own careers. Emma could feel frustration rising within her, like a tide threatening to overwhelm her. She realized that competence alone wouldn't be enough to win this battle. She needed to be stronger than she had ever been. Rumors spread with astonishing speed. "She's overwhelmed and about to quit," someone whispered near the elevator. Another person claimed they had heard that Emma almost cost the company an important client, even though it was a blatant lie. Each word felt like an invisible blow, every rumor a stumbling block meant to trip her up. Meanwhile, the executives smiled at her during meetings while working behind the scenes to make sure her downfall was only a matter of time. But Emma wasn't one to be destroyed so easily. Instead of panicking, she started acting with greater caution. Every time a document vanished, she made extra copies. Every email she sent included someone from upper management and CC. Slowly but surely, she learned how to navigate the hostile environment with precision and patience. They could try to sabotage her, but Emma was determined not to give them the satisfaction of seeing her fall. The emotional strain was crushing. She would come home exhausted, her shoulders heavy with tension, her mind spinning in 1,000 directions. But on the hardest nights, she reminded herself of everything she had already overcome to get here. This wasn't the first time people had underestimated her strength, and it wouldn't be the last. She started paying close attention to the details, identifying which employees were actively involved in the attacks and which ones were simply following the flow. She knew she couldn't win alone, but if she kept her focus, she might find unexpected allies along the way. Survival wouldn't just be a matter of winning, it would be about holding on long enough for the truth to come to light. The executives thought they were defeating her, but unknowingly, they were fueling her determination. The more they tried to bring her down, the more Emma understood that she needed to exceed every expectation. Each obstacle became a lesson, every blow a new opportunity to grow stronger. It wouldn't be an easy fight, but Emma knew that the real challenge wasn't just to win, it was to endure until the end without losing faith in herself. Deep down, she had a feeling that something big was about to happen. Emma felt the ground beneath her feet beginning to give way. The attacks had intensified in recent days, and nothing seemed to go in her favor. Projects mysteriously vanished from the system, and documents she knew she had sent were swapped with outdated versions. The atmosphere in meetings grew increasingly suffocating. Executives exchanged knowing glances and discreet smiles, as if they were certain her downfall was inevitable. One morning, Emma received a message that felt like the final blow. A major client had canceled a contract, citing supposed negligence on her part, even though she knew she hadn't made any mistakes. Seeing her name dragged into yet another trap, Emma felt a wave of defeat wash over her. It was as if all her efforts had been in vain. As she struggled to pull herself together for another day, an extraordinary meeting was suddenly called. No details were provided. When Emma entered the meeting room, she found a tense scene. The executives were seated in their usual places, but there was a heavy atmosphere, as if everyone knew something significant was about to happen. Michael Reynolds was already at the head of the table, silent and composed, his eyes scanning the faces around him. There were no smiles. Only a calm, unsettling stillness that sent a chill down Emma's spine. Then Michael spoke. "We've reached an unacceptable point," he said, his voice low but controlled. "Over the past few months, I've been investigating irregularities within the company, and what I found was deeply disappointing." His words echoed through the room like silent thunder. The executives exchanged nervous glances, and some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Emma didn't fully understand what was happening, but she sensed that something far greater was unfolding. Michael calmly pulled a black folder from his briefcase and opened it, handling it as if it were a piece of evidence in a trial. "This company is not a playground for personal games, and everyone involved in these conspiracies will be held accountable." He looked directly at some of the senior executives, and the tension in the room shifted to pure panic. "I have in my hands proof of sabotage, manipulation of information, and conspiracies against employees who acted with integrity." Emma held her breath. Those words were more than she had dared to hope for. Michael Reynolds not only knew what had been happening, he had been one step ahead all along. The CEO began listing names. Each mention felt like a sentence. Executives who had long believed they were above any consequence were exposed one by one, unable to defend themselves. The room plunged into an awkward silence as Michael, cold and meticulous, dismantled the web of betrayals. "You are all dismissed, effective immediately," he concluded, leaving no room for discussion. "You think this company is built on titles and favors, but you've forgotten the most important thing: competence and character." The blow was swift and ruthless. Security was called, and one by one, the traitorous executives were escorted out of the room while the remaining employees watched in shock. No one dared to speak. When the last of them left, Michael turned to Emma. There was a seriousness in his gaze, but also something else, a silent acknowledgement. Without saying a word, he gave a slight nod as if to say, "Now it's your turn." Emma felt a mixture of relief and accomplishment, but also the weight of the responsibility she now carried. The silence in the room was absolute, but inside Emma, a storm of emotions raged. It hadn't been just luck or circumstance. Her courage and resilience had brought her to this point. And as the meeting room door closed behind her, she knew this marked the end of one chapter, and the beginning of a much more challenging one. The days following the dismissal of the corrupt executives felt like a fresh breeze after a long, stifling storm. The atmosphere in the company shifted almost instantly. The hidden tensions, whispered conspiracies, and power struggles gave way to a lighter, more collaborative environment. For the first time, meetings flowed without dirty games or hidden agendas. Emma felt this change in every detail, from the tone of conversations to the more respectful glances she now received in the hallways. Although the scars from the attacks were still fresh, Emma began to settle into her new role. Colleagues who had once ignored her now recognized her as someone who had not only survived but proven herself worthy of the position. When she spoke in meetings, her ideas were listened to attentively. Some suggestions were questioned, as in any healthy workplace, but without the intention of undermining her. Gradually, Emma earned her place, not out of a need to prove herself but because her competence was finally finding fertile ground to grow. Michael Reynolds, too, seemed different. He was still the same demanding and reserved leader, but there was something new in his approach. During their meetings, he didn't just delegate tasks to Emma. He started involving her in strategic discussions. "I want your opinion on this," he'd say often, creating space for her to contribute fresh perspectives. Michael seemed determined not only to lead but to transform the company into a place where innovation and merit weighed more than titles and positions. Slowly, Emma and Michael formed an unlikely but effective partnership. Together, they began working on projects aimed at changing the company's culture. They created internal programs to give a voice to employees at all levels and implemented more transparent evaluation and promotion systems. The idea was simple: to prevent the company from reverting to an environment dominated by political games and favoritism. And Michael, ever perceptive, made sure that Emma took the lead on some of these initiatives, knowing that she embodied the kind of change they wanted to promote. Emma threw herself into these projects with dedication. She felt that she was finally applying what she had learned in college, but also drawing on something no degree could teach: the resilience of someone who had endured hardships and emerged stronger. Her journey began to inspire other employees, especially those who, like her, were used to feeling invisible. In a way, Emma became a symbol that it was possible to break through barriers and rewrite one's destiny. In quiet moments, Emma and Michael exchanged glances of mutual understanding. There was no need for many words. There was respect built on shared challenges and earned trust. Michael never gave unnecessary praise, but his actions spoke louder. When Emma completed an important project, he would let slip a brief comment, "Good job." And for Emma, those few words meant more than any long-winded speech. Over time, Emma's influence extended beyond the internal projects. Other leaders began consulting her on important decisions, and the transformation in the company's culture became visible even to clients. Her name, once whispered with disdain, now circulated through the halls with genuine respect. Emma was still young, but she was becoming a central figure in the company's renewal. Of course, challenges still lay ahead. Some changes met resistance, especially from employees who preferred the old power dynamics. But Emma faced each obstacle with the same determination that had brought her this far. And whenever bigger difficulties arose, Michael was by her side, offering support, not in a paternalistic way, but as a mentor who trusted her ability to solve problems. The company's transformation was not just structural, it was a shift in spirit. With each small victory, Emma felt that she had not only found a purpose but also a place where she could finally be herself, without hiding or having to fight for every bit of recognition. There was still a long road ahead, but now she walked it knowing she was in control of her own story. Emma pushed open the door to the old cafe, and the familiar sound of the bell above the door rang softly in the air. The aroma of fresh coffee and warm bread immediately wrapped around her, bringing back memories of hard days that now felt far away. She chose a table by the window, the same one she used to sit at during short breaks between shifts. There, so many times, she had dreamed of a different life, imagining what it would be like to cross the line that separated those who served from those who were served. She ordered a simple black coffee just the way she liked it. When the cup arrived, she wrapped her hands around it and sat in silence, watching the city move on the other side of the glass. For the first time in a long while, there was no rush, no worry, just a quiet moment to get lost in her thoughts. Her eyes wandered to the cafe walls, where a few job postings for temporary positions were still pinned. That's how it all started, she thought. From an invisible waitress to a key figure in the transformation of one of the city's largest companies. Emma allowed herself a small, quiet smile. She had overcome so much: prejudice, betrayal, sleepless nights, and the constant feeling of not belonging. Now, as she looked back, she realized she no longer had anything to prove to anyone. She had discovered more than just a career. She had found purpose and, most importantly, confidence in herself. The girl who once served coffee in that place no longer existed. In her place was a woman who knew exactly what she wanted and how far she could go. As she took a sip of her coffee, the door behind her opened, followed by the soft chime of the bell. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Michael Reynolds' presence, discreet and firm, filled the room like a familiar shadow. He approached the table without ceremony, as if the meeting had been planned all along. "So, this is where it all began," he commented, pulling out a chair and sitting across from her. Emma smiled slightly. "Yes. I used to wonder if I'd ever leave this place." Michael looked at her for a moment with that calculated gaze she knew well. But this time there was something more, a genuine respect and a lightness he rarely showed. "It's not about where you start," he said calmly. "It's about what you do when you get there." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both aware of how much they had changed and how their journey had transformed them. Michael, who once saw only numbers and efficiency, had found in Emma more than a promising employee. He had found an ally, someone with whom he could share the mission of transforming not just a company but an entire culture. "I have some projects in mind," Michael said, breaking the silence. His eyes gleamed with the familiar determination that made him a relentless leader. "This time, I want you by my side from the start." There were no orders, no pressure, just an invitation. Emma knew this was his way of saying that she was now his equal, not just a collaborator but a partner. She set the empty cup down on the table, still feeling the warmth of the coffee on her hands. She didn't need to think much. Her answer was ready before the question was even asked. "I'm in," she said with a genuine smile, the kind that only comes when everything finally makes sense. There were no more doubts or fears. Just the certainty that she was exactly where she needed to be. Michael returned her smile, and for a moment they sat there, sharing a small victory. It wasn't the end of a journey, but the perfect conclusion to a chapter. Emma knew that challenges still lay ahead, but now she was ready to face them, with the scars and lessons she carried with pride. She stood from the table, feeling lighter than ever. And as she walked out of the cafe beside Michael, she realized one simple, powerful truth: there was nothing left to fear. The bell chimed one last time as the door closed behind them. And with steady steps and a serene smile, Emma moved forward, ready to embrace everything life still had to offer. If you enjoyed the incredible story of Emma and Michael, subscribe to our channel and activate notifications so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. If you love heartfelt stories and want to support our channel in continuing to deliver high-quality content, consider contributing through Buy Me a Coffee. The link is in the first pinned comment. Your help is essential for us to keep improving. Thank you for your support. See you in the next exciting story.